When it comes to laning, a big part of how you interact with your opponents revolves around how you position. Avoiding deaths, getting kills, winning trades, none of it is possible without proper positioning. So here are my tips and tricks for how to position in lane. Now, in lane, each champion, as well as the minions, have an influence on overall positioning and pressure. Each of these things, both champions and the minions, have a respective zone, which has a different interaction based on what you're trying to do. And during the laning phase, there are three main things you will try to do: farm, fight, and avoid fights. Throughout the laning phase, you always want to be thinking about what you're trying to accomplish. It's like when you watch the pros on stream, they're always saying, oh, I'm going to do this, or oh, we just need to farm now. It's important to be aware of what you want to do in the first place so that you can plan and set up and position to do it. So for when you want to just farm, that means you're going to want to position passively. Passive positioning does not protect you from fights, but it makes fighting for your opponents difficult, since you have space to kite and space to fight back if they go in on you. To position passively, what you want to do is keep your positioning in a way that the creeps are between you and your opponent. Trading and harassing will still probably happen, but only to a small extent. In addition, this type of positioning will block skill shots from your opponent. So if they have pressure on you with a skill shot and head to the side, you can mirror their rotation around the creeps to a certain extent, as long as you don't pin yourself down by keeping the creep wave in between the two of you. For when you want to fight, you're going to want to position aggressively. Positioning aggressively gets you close enough to be able to initiate on your opponents, causing them to be forced to fight you or to have to back off. And the way you want to do this is by going forward, usually on the side of the creep wave. This gives you a potential angle for skill shots, as well as pushing up enough to be able to zone out your opponents. If you're really far ahead or have a really big advantage, you can go completely in front of the creep wave for a full zone or easy fight onto the opponents. And for when you're trying to avoid fights, you're going to want to position defensively. Now, positioning defensively is really similar to positioning passively, but the difference is that when you position passively, your opponents still have a chance to fight you by positioning aggressively. And the way you avoid that entirely is to just keep your distance from your opponents. Think back to the creep wave positioning of positioning passively. You want to do the same here, but instead of keeping the creep wave between the two of you, you want to keep that much distance away from the opponents. So for every inch they move up, you move an inch back. Yes, you're probably going to have to give up some CS, but if you're wanting to position defensively, you're already under pressure from something anyways. And in this way, it's going to force your opponents to go aggressive onto you, leaving them open to counter ganks, or otherwise you can just get the CS anyways. But if you're really far behind, you're likely going to have to just hug the tower and then still give up the CS under the tower. Being really far behind, but still going for the CS under the tower, is a one-way ticket to being tower dove. And there are also a couple more specific tips that are worth noting. First, we have positioning for ganks. It's important to understand that when you pass the midline of a lane, you are vulnerable to ganks, and so you have to be really careful. In addition, you're vulnerable to a dive when you get pinned on the inside of the tower or when the opponents set up a flank on you, so just keep that in mind. The second being when it's okay to ignore creeps. Now, creep damage in lane is pretty high, especially early on, so having prolonged fights where you maintain creep aggro is usually a bad idea. So you only want to forego the creep wave when you first have a big enough advantage to tank creeps in the first place, and second, when you're going for a bursty fight, really a fight that won't last that long. Players don't always expect people to initiate past the creep wave, so you can get the jump on your opponents and it can be enough to go past the creep waves, as long as your fight is short and you have some kind of damage or fight advantage of the sort. And lastly, we have for top and bot lane positioning involving the bushes. Bush positioning is really interesting as it creates this object to control through positioning. You control the bush through zoning your opponents out of it, and can use it to further zone, start fights, or even as a way to force your opponents into poor positioning. When you hug the bush, in order for your opponents to dodge skill shots and initiations, it forces them to hug the side of the river. This puts them closer to the area they would be ganked, and can potentially really help ganks, especially if the opponents are positioning passively. And those are just about all the tips I could come up with. My name is Jared, and as always, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you guys next time. Add this on the screen right now, or stay connected at facebook.com/gamingcurios. Drop a like, share this video, and make sure to subscribe for some more awesome content in the future.